my hobbies is to collect Nintendo consoles. I've said this before on the channel, and it's a really fun hobby. Being able to have all these different consoles right at my fingertips and be able to play games as they were originally intended. However, there are some wacky consoles out there. Yeah, not every single console is a GameCube or a Nintendo Switch. Some of them are a Wii Mini. Let's talk about them. Nintendo, for the longest time, has had a reputation of doing things a little bit differently from the other console manufacturers. Instead of, just making a normal console that's slightly more powerful than the last generation, they'll make their console have a stick for a controller, or make their controller look like a trident, or just make the entire console itself the controller. Nintendo's always done things slightly differently compared to Sony or Microsoft, and has always made them stand out. I'm gonna use the Wii remote. I'm gonna make my console have a stick for a controller. Now, usually this just leads to Nintendo's consoles often having a lot of charm to them, and they really do. However, sometimes it can lead to Nintendo's consoles not being, let's say, the best. Not even necessarily the best, but they end up being very weird at the very least. They really be covering a lot of the very niche ones. Some consoles you wouldn't immediately, think of when you think of Nintendo consoles. As I said in the intro, the Wii Mini! The Wii Mini is a Nintendo console that was released right at the tail end of the Wii's lifespan. The Wii Mini was released originally in Canada and was basically meant to be taken around to, cabins to be used by families during winter time if they're taking a holiday. It's not the best thing ever, and it's certainly interesting. As a console, the Wii Mini is pretty basic. It's just a Wii. However, the one thing about the Wii Mini that's really weird is the fact that, well, number one, it's a top-loading console. Yeah, unlike the Wii, where you actually just normally would slot the disc in the front, the Wii Mini acted more like a GameCube, where you had to open up the top and put the disc in there. The Wii Mini also, for absolutely no reason, removes both GameCube disc support and also, for absolutely really no reason, completely removes internet support. I don't know why. Well, I do know why. Nintendo's entire goal with the Wii Mini was to make it as compact and tiny as possible. It was to remove all the unneeded features and really just make this for playing specifically and only Wii games. And, it does that fine, but who's gonna buy this thing, really? It's about the same size as a normal Wii anyway, so you might as well just bring a normal Wii with you, and then you get the internet connectivity and the GameCube compatibility as well. The Wii Mini is just kind of a... What's the point? It removes features that are objectively useful, and it's not that much smaller than a normal Wii. I will say that it does definitely look interesting, and it did come with a nice snazzy red Wii remote and nunchuck, which I won't lie, they look quite nice. However, apart from that, the Wii Mini really doesn't even have much of a purpose. And speaking of the Wii, there's another variant of the Wii as well. The Wii Family Edition. Now, the Wii Family Edition is just like a normal Nintendo Wii. However, it was originally released in Europe, and it removes GameCube compatibility. For whatever reason, Nintendo decided to make this. I don't really know why they made this, to be honest. It's just kind of... What? It's just making a Nintendo Wii. They're removing the ability to play GameCube games on it for no reason. Man, I'm sure glad I bought this Nintendo Wii. Can't wait to play my GameCube games on it. Just gonna open this up. I want it open! 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 The weirdest thing about the Wii Family Edition is the fact that the GameCube ports on the top are actually still there. If you carve off the top with a knife and look underneath, which some crazy people have done for some reason, the GameCube ports for the controllers and the memory cards are still there. They're just covered over. And it can still read GameCube discs, it just has an inhibitor on it. So as to why Nintendo really did this, I genuinely don't know. But they did, and well, it exists. It's very interesting. I actually had a Wii Family Edition for a while, and I never understood why it couldn't play GameCube games. I was just clueless on what was even going on with it. I tried to play GameCube games at multiple times, and it just wouldn't work. And, well, it's because it was a Family Edition, not a normal one. However, the Wii wasn't the first generation Nintendo decided to make some weird offshoot versions of their main consoles. No, they've been doing this from the beginning, actually. The NES Top Loader. The NES Top Loader was an NES that was released by Nintendo, in the NES era. It is just an NES, except instead of its normal and traditional classic NES way of loading games by putting the game through the front and pressing it down, almost like a VCR. Instead, it loaded games like a SNES or an N64 through the top. This was basically just meant for two things. Number one, it could read games slightly more accurately. Sometimes the original NES wouldn't read games correctly, and it was prone to you having to blow on the cartridges and blow into the cartridge slot, which isn't really the best. However, on the top loader, that was less likely to happen because the buildup of dust generally wasn't as bad. And the second reason they did this was to stop people from being stupid. What I mean by that? A lot of people, when they originally got their NES, well, they just assumed that it was essentially just a brick and it could handle anything. And so because of that, often people would place drinks on top of it, and then the drinks would inevitably get spilt and destroy their console. They'd complain to Nintendo about it, and Nintendo would say, well, you're not supposed to place drinks on top of the video game console. Are you stupid? Yes. The NES Top Loader is really, though, just an NES. It does everything that a normal NES can do. There is genuinely, no differences between the two. It's just how it loads its games. It's a lot smaller than a normal NES, of course, and you can just see from the images there, but it's okay, I guess. The point really was just to stop people from being stupid and placing drinks on top of their NES, which, I mean, that's fair enough, I guess. I guess Nintendo got enough complaints about that they had to actually make an entirely new console for it. And the NES's sequel, the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, also came victim to Nintendo making really weird offshoots of it. The SNES Junior. What was the point of this thing? The SNES Junior was a very slightly smaller version of a SNES. That's it. That was the whole thing. That was the whole point of it. It loads the same as a top-loading console. It turns on, it plays your SNES games. It doesn't remove any features or anything. It just kind of is. Why it exists, and the thing is, the weirdest thing about the SNES Junior is, well, the NES Top Loader was, exclusive to North America. The SNES Junior? These were in all regions! The SNES Junior existed in North America, Europe, and in Japan. So this had to have been at least somewhat successful for Nintendo to make regional variants of it. Why these regional variants exist? I really don't know. But they do. I don't get it, to be honest. So, there's the NES Top Loader, there's the SNES Junior, Wii Mini, the Wii Family Edition. What other consoles are there that are really strange and niche from Nintendo? How about a handheld? The Game Boy Light. The Game Boy Light, which I happen to have one of, not to brag or anything. I'm such a Nintendo show. Was a Nintendo console created by Nintendo back during the Game Boy era. The Game Boys, they were all decently alright. They had some decent games and they were really successful. However, they all had one glaring flaw that existed throughout them all the way up until the Game Boy SP that fixed it fully. And that was the lack of a backlit screen. You couldn't have a backlight on your Game Boy, and well, that meant you couldn't really see what you're doing. This was a problem in Nintendo's handheld systems for years, and while they would fully fix it with the Game Boy SP, they actually fixed it before the SP. This thing right here, the Game Boy Light. The Game Boy Light it's just a normal Game Boy. This plays normal Game Boy games, not color or anything. And it has a single feature that the normal Game Boy doesn't. You can turn it on, and it will turn on, or you can turn on a very vague light. You can't even see it here. You literally can't even see. You won't be able to see that on the video. The only way this is ever really going to be useful is at night when you really can't see. And I will admit, I've used it at night and it definitely does work. It brightens up the screen enough for you to be able to see, as to where on a normal Game Boy you'd be completely in the dark. So it does work, kind of. My only real question is, why did they remove this feature from the next Game Boys? Most people say it's because it was too expensive or something. I call bullcrap. There's no way that tiny little light in there was expensive. That is, they found the cheapest light they could for that thing. I think the last niche console I'd like to talk about today is, well, one of the most niche consoles Nintendo has, but also one that I really want. The Panasonic Q. Now, the Panasonic Q is a GameCube that can also play DVDs. Panasonic and Nintendo decided at one point they were going to team up during the GameCube era. You see, during the GameCube era, Nintendo was getting absolutely smashed. They were getting destroyed by the competition of Sony and even Microsoft to a certain extent later. And so because of this, Nintendo decided they should probably, you know, fix their GameCube. They should fix that console, make a better version. One of the main reasons a lot of people bought the PS2 is because the PS2 could also play DVDs and it could also play CDs. The GameCube could only play GameCube games, and Nintendo went out to fix that. Teaming up with Panasonic, they made what was known as the Panasonic Q, which is a GameCube which also had a DVD drive separately it had a separate DVD drive that would come out. And additionally, it had its own separate controller. It looks like it's made of glass. It looks like a glass box. And it also has a TV remote. Yeah. This thing was only ever released in Japan, and apparently it bombed so hard that it never even made it outside of Japan. Didn't even bother porting it to a different region. So as a console, it's not only really rare, but obviously what comes with rarity, incredibly expensive. I mean, buying one of these, it'd set you back at least $1,000 on eBay. Yeah, I do kind of want one. I mean, it's just such a weird little console. And additionally, if I buy one, I can mod it to make it speak English, so it's normal. So yeah, that's Nintendo's more off-branch weird consoles. There are some other ones that I've not mentioned here that are too important. I guess I'll give them a little mention here. There's multiple TV variants of Nintendo consoles, namely the NES and the SNES, as to which essentially it's a CRT TV with an NES or an SNES built in. There's a weird Game Boy Advance player that we put in a car for some reason. There's the Color TV game, which is less niche and more just early because it was Nintendo's first ever console. And there's also another version of the SNES TV thing, but it's a Japanese Famicom instead. So Nintendo's niche consoles. What do I think about them? Well, interesting to say the least. You know, some of them aren't the worst idea ever. Like the Game Boy Light, I like the concept behind it, and clearly it was somewhat used as inspiration for when they built the SP. At the very least, it was in their minds when they were building the next Game Boys. And, well, for something like the Wii Mini, it's just kind of, there was an idea there, but it just doesn't end up being that useful because, well, it's about the same size as a normal Wii anyways. There are consoles like the NES Top Loader, which were made to fix just general human stupidity, and there's consoles like the Panasonic Q, which were made to fix Nintendo's stupidity and not putting a disc drive in their console. And then, of course, you've got the absolutely what's the point consoles? The SNES Junior and the Wii Family Edition, removing GameCube support for absolutely no reason whatsoever, and just existing for absolutely no reason whatsoever and being completely obsolete to just buying a normal SNES. So, those are the Nintendo consoles, and that's what I think about them. Nintendo really is kind of weird, and they can be really niche sometimes. Again, for seemingly no reason. But, to be honest, that's kind of why I like them. Nintendo's always been the oddball out when it comes to the gaming companies. They never have done things quite the same as Sony or Microsoft or even other companies like EA or Valve or something. And I appreciate that about them. So I guess the only thing that's left is final verdict? I'm gonna try and get that GameCube game running again. Don't worry, I'm sure it'll work this time. Come on! Come on! I want to play Double Dash! Please!